Hi, I'm Alex Zurich. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm currently a student here at SDSU studying film.
My name is Jonah Richards. I'm from San Francisco, California, and I'm a filmmaker here at San Diego State University.
And hi, I'm Jeff Deverett. I am originally from Toronto, Canada, but now I live in San Diego, and I am also a filmmaker, but I'm also a professor and consultant professor at San Diego State University. And these are filmmakers and students.
And this is our Filmmakers Ask.
Okay.
So say I have to pitch to a distributor, how would that look like? Where would I start? What's the first thing I would talk about? Like, how do I set that up?
Mm-hmm. Keep it short, first of all, okay, because they get hundreds of pitches and they get very anxious to, and there's a little ADD in terms of their attention. So you want to do it, say, within 5 minutes. A lot of people take a half an hour and talk way too much about the movie. So they've distributed hundreds of movies, they get it right away. So the first thing you do is say, introduce yourself. They want to like you first. All right, hi, here's who I am. I have this passion for making films. I made this great film. All right, here's the film. You have to be able to do a log line or a 2-sentence description of your movie. A log line is 1 sentence. Very hard to do a really good log line. And people struggle with that. And everybody says, I say, tell me in 1 sentence what your movie about, and they take 15 sentences. So if you can boil it down to 1 sentence, that will catch their attention really quickly. Like, for instance, my movie God Incorporated. Controversy ensues when four business school students create and launch a new religion on campus. I mean, that tells you a lot about what that movie's about. That's all you need. They get it. They know exactly what the genre is. They know what the characters are. They know sort of what the controversy is. They'll get it. If you can contain it to 1 sentence, it's perfect. All right? No more than 2 or 3. Don't go on and on and on. And this is going to be great, and these characters are going to do this and everything like that. You'll lose them. Okay, so after you've done that, the next thing they want to know about is your marketing. Do you have like an idea of how you can assist them to create audience awareness? And you want to talk a lot about that. Hey, I'm making this gymnastics movie. I'm going to be putting outreach right out to all these gymnastics clubs across the country, which is going to help promote the movie and create attention so that when you put it onto platforms, I'll draw audience there. That's really important to get their attention. They want to hear that. And then the last thing is financing. Are you there because you need their money, or are you there just because you want them to help distribute the movie? If you need their money, it's going to be tricky. If you don't need their money, you say to them, it's already financed, put together. We have a great crew. We're going to be making a great movie. Oh, is this before, by the way, or after you made your movie?
After, I would say.
Oh, after. Okay, so you've already shown them look, at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to one thing and one thing only. Did you make a good movie? If they think you made a good movie that is going to, entertain an audience, and they can see that, then you can spend 2 minutes on your pitch. It's mostly, hi, I think you'd be a good distributor, and watch my movie.
In that case, would you still talk to them about how you plan to market it?
Absolutely, because let's say you've made a generic horror film. Okay, they'll have 50 horror films that they can choose from in that 1 week. Probably every week they'll have 50 films, all right? The difference between your film getting it to the top of the pile is that you actually have a good marketing campaign and the other ones don't.
And what makes a good marketing campaign? Is it like how much money you're spending on the marketing campaign, or like really what you're doing in the audience that it's going to reach?
Both, okay? The more you spend, obviously, the more traction you could probably get with your audience. But how you spend it, how strategically you spend it is important too. You want to have a well thought out plan that is going to target an audience. Like, you don't want to just throw generic money loosely on social media or advertising, because it won't work. You have to have a really good, well thought out strategic plan. So if you're deploying your resources strategically and they see that you've thought out who you're going to go to and how you're going to target, that is very compelling. Maybe more so than even how much you're going to spend.
I have a question. How has marketing and distribution changed with the whole age of social media compared to like in the current day compared to maybe 15 or 20 years ago, where I'm sure marketing distribution was really different and you didn't have that option?
Great question. Okay, so first of all, there's 2 changes we should talk about. The first change is that distributors these days don't really do marketing for independent films. They do what we call distribution, is now just basically creating access, putting your film into into play on a streaming platform or something like that, or multiple platforms. So now it's the filmmaker generally has to do their own marketing, which is not what it used to be. 15, 20 years ago, say 20 years ago, all distributors did all the marketing. The filmmaker, here's a great film, figure out what to do with it, and they took care of it all. Now, they spent money on your behalf and they charged it back to you, but they were engaged in marketing. So one of the major changes is that now that filmmakers really need to do their own marketing for the most part. A distributor will do a little bit, but not enough to matter. The filmmaker really has to take it upon themselves. That's the major change. And the second major change with social media is a huge one, because now you have the ability to reach the entire world audience from your computer or from your phone even, right? You never had that before. You'd have to spend millions to do national TV advertising and print advertising and all this kind of stuff. So you have way more access to a worldwide audience at no cost. That's the good news. The bad news is it's incredibly crowded marketplace, right? How do you get people's attention? So you're competing against everybody now, the whole world who has a phone who can go on social media. So, having access is great, but you got to be strategic on how you get people's attention. So it's a little bit tricky. Back then, it was a game as who could spend the most amount of money. And that's why the studios always won that game, because they could always outspend everybody. Like indie filmmakers could never afford to do national television advertising. That would be 10 times the cost of their movie or more. Whereas a huge studio would make $100 million movie and spend another $100 million on national TV advertising or whatever, and that's why they have the advantage. So it's the competition is still the level of sort of difficulty is still the same, just different challenges.
Interesting. Thank you.
And you mentioned obviously it's super crowded on social media. Part of this crowd too is influencers. So how do you go about having an influencer market your movie, and how do you decide what you want them to do for you?
I love that. That's a good question. Okay, so I gotta admit, the influencer thing is new to me. It's crazy, okay? I still have not figured out totally how to navigate the influencer thing. I know that you're active on social media, so you probably know more about that than I do. Like for me, I used influencers on Full Out too. I hired, and spent a lot of money for these 2 gymnastics influencers, and I felt that I got my money's worth. But who's an influencer? Let's start with, who is an influencer? Basically, you say you're an influencer, and then you become one. Is there any criteria? Do you have to have 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 followers on Instagram to become an influencer? No, it's not regulated, so anybody can just call themselves an influencer. Secondly, how do you verify that these people even have these followers? There's ways to do that. Thirdly, what do you ask them to do for you? Like, do you want them to post 2 times on Instagram, 1 on YouTube, blah, blah, blah? And fourthly, how much do you pay? Like, how do you know how much to pay and if you got value for your money? It's just the Wild West out there with influencers. But Alex, let me ask you, what do you recommend? Because, you know social media really well. What's your take on that?
I think it really all depends. I think the first thing that I would probably do when I'm working with an influencer is check their comments, check their likes, see their engagement. I feel like engagement is super important because I know a lot of people out there, they have a lot of followers, but they don't have a lot of engagement. I know that there's not going to be people clicking in their bio when they say to click in their bio. So I definitely feel like someone like Alex Earl right now, super big on social media, super active, super trendy. She would be an amazing person to work with. She'd be worth the money to put down. But I feel like someone who's, maybe just starting out or has these followers but then hasn't posted in a little while and you see that they're not getting the same amount of comments than they were before, I feel like that wouldn't really be as worth the money to me.
Mm-hmm. But it's a bit of a crapshoot. It's sort of your gut feeling.
Yeah.
So we're working with, there's companies that do this professionally that kind of qualify influencers and give you strategies on who to use and whether they use nano ones or micro ones or big ones and how much you should spend and everything. But again, a lot of it is just like everything else. You take your best shot.
I have a question. What was the first movie that you ever made or distributed in your career?
Well, distributed is different because I worked for a distribution company. So the first big movie that I ever distributed and it wasn't big at the time. I mean, at the time it was relatively big, but you guys have never heard about it. It's called 18 Again with Zac Efron. Was it Zac Efron? It might not have been. No, it wasn't. It was, yeah, it was called, it wasn't. No, he came a lot later. It was somebody like him. It was called 18 Again. I worked for this company called New World, and it was at the time for us a big movie, but again, you can look it up. It wasn't that big a movie. So that's the first one, big movie that I distributed for the company that I worked for. But the first movie I ever made was a film called My Brother's Keeper, which was my passion movie. I mean, that's the reason I got into the film business, to make that movie. That's the one I wrote and dreamed about, and what drove me.
So what's the best piece of advice you could give to young filmmakers who are looking to make movies for a living, and they're not sure whether that necessarily is indie or not indie, but figuring out what path they want to take and how to go about learning and developing their skill sets?
I think the first thing you have to decide is, do you want to make your own movie? Like, do you want to be in the driver's seat at some point in your career to decide what movie you want to make? Because if you go the studio route and you become, say, a cinematographer or director like you want to do, and you're constantly working for other people, you're always going to be making their movies. Unless you hit it really, really big, you become, Christopher Nolan or somebody like that, and you say, hey, I want to make this movie. But that's, 1 in a million or whatever. So, but it could happen. So that could be the way to go. But generally, when you're working in the big studio system, you're employed by them. You do what they tell you to do. You have a lot of creative and artistic control to do it, but you're not choosing the movie. Right. When you're an independent filmmaker, and you can say, this is the movie I want to make. So that's why that drives a lot of people, because they want to have the control as to what project to choose, and of course all the creative control on how to make it. All right, because even in the studio system, even though you give big name directors a lot of creative control, it's not 100%. Maybe once in a while that's the case. All right, because they have to release the film and make money. It's a business for them. So the first thing you have to decide is, what route do you want to go? Do you want to be in charge of like your own destiny? It's kind of like choosing to be an entrepreneur in business or to work for a company. And they're both good. They can both be lucrative. They can both be super rewarding and very artistically rewarding. When you go down the indie road and you're an entrepreneur, it's a lot more financial risk. But that's all about risk and reward. You're basically taking way more financial risk, and if you hit big, you get a lot more reward from it. All right, so that's why some people like it, but it's a lot more work and you're not getting a paycheck, and But in the film business, you're only as good as the last film you did anyway. So even though you might be successful in one, the next one you might fail in, and then you're here today, gone tomorrow. So first thing is, which road do you want to travel? All right. When you decide that road to travel, here's my advice. Focus as much as you can and be as good at it as you can, okay? If you want to be a director, just focus on that. Become a really darn good director. Passion sells, all right? People love when people are super overly passionate. Obviously, skill sells too. They want to see that you have the skills, but they want to see that you have that passion, and you just have to, this is who you are, and you define yourself by that, all right? And then you just have to be persistent and wait, and try your best. Always try your best, and hopefully you hit a couple of base hits early on in your career. If not, you just keep swinging and swinging and swinging until you get there. And hopefully you get lucky and hit a home run one day. That's it. But the other thing I would strongly suggest, and obviously I teach this, is that even though you're going to be, in your case, much more motivated by the artistic side of the business, which is making the movies and directing them, you should have an understanding of the business side. Okay, because that will help you navigate your entire career and understand how it all fits together. And it will also help you hopefully make more money at some point. Even if you don't make and sell your own movies, just even understanding how it all works, you'll just be taken more seriously. You'll understand, all the ins and outs of how, like as a director, you'll make better movies because you'll know that the audience matters. It's not necessarily about you. It's about what they're seeing and what they need to see. So
right.
It's helpful to understand the business side of this business.
Thank you.
What do you think the whole, the most frustrating process is? A part of the whole, marketing your film, or the financing, distribution, budgeting? What do you have, the most difficulty with? I'm
going to say what filmmakers have the most difficulty with, because what I've programmed differently now because of the way I came up through the system, through distribution. Most filmmakers have the most amount of difficulty with distribution, and that is primarily with the rejection of distribution. All right, we have all these things called gatekeepers. So at the first level, it's like, you get to a gate and somebody's there to tell you no. So the first level is getting a distributor. No, 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 your movie's not good enough, we don't like you, blah, 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 go away. Okay, so finally you figure out a gate to get through, you get through that. Then you've got the streamers. No, 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 we don't do business with indies, we don't like them, you're not big enough, no A-list actors, no, 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 no. It's like, go home, find another way, blah, blah, blah. So most people will struggle with the amount of rejection and the amount of the closed doors and the closed gates that you have to encounter for no reason really other than, like, you could have the greatest thing and it's no before you even get the first word out of your mouth. It's kind of like, with the case of a lot of the streamers, as you know, as we've been looking at them, you can't even submit to them to get a no. Like, you want to get it. Like, in the business, here's what we say, by the way. No is the second best answer. Okay, the worst answer is maybe, or no answer at all. Because no answer, you don't even know if they even saw what you said to them. At least when you get a no, it's like, hey, we either didn't watch it, or we don't care about it, or we don't like it. No. So you can move on. No, you can deal with, okay, they're out. Although I use this expression, no means not today. So they're not necessarily out. We'll tuck them over here, because in a year from now, somebody else will be in that position, and you can knock on their door again. So, but rejection's by far the hardest thing for filmmakers to deal with, and anybody who's trying to pursue a dream.
And you said obviously it's really hard to talk to a distributor. Some streaming platforms don't even offer one. But would you suggest going to film markets, or if you could, if there's some that are easier to contact online, would you rather do it online versus going to the market itself?
Maybe a combination of the two. If you going to a market is a real good learning experience, and it's an awakening. You really see what the business is all about. It can be very intimidating, but you can learn a lot. So I strongly suggest at one point in your time you go to at least one market, not two. There's a way to go to a market, go with somebody else who's done it before, so you can have a friend and navigate it, and there's ways to make it a little friendlier. All right. Online, I still believe that human connection matters. That's why a market is nice. Humans are talking to humans as opposed to online, where it's not as personal. But so I think online is better after the market. You said hello, you met this person for 5 minutes. It's kind of like dating, and now you can do online. It's a little bit more effective, I think. Because online, you're not going to necessarily get any traction.
So it's kind of like follow up online after you've seen them in person.
If you can see them in person, a lot of times you can't. They're not going to be accessible. So you try your best, but and then you just throw it out there. And like, let's say you want to get into a big streamer like HBO or Disney or something like that. You're not going to see them in a market. You're not going to get past the front door unless you're really smart and know how to navigate that. All right. So, and online, you're probably not going to get through the front door either. It's going to be tricky. So you got to be almost like some type of, spy or something to figure out how to infiltrate the fortress.
And would you say that COVID-19 has had a big effect on these film markets and how people distribute?
Yes. For 2 years, the markets weren't even open. They were all online. So now they're back live. And, some people are used to doing online work, so they don't need to travel anymore. So the attendance is a bit lower. But we'll see what direction that happens. I happen to be a big advocate of online virtual business. I mean, it's so convenient. And you sit in front of a computer and you do Zoom, and you're face to face with somebody. So it's not so terrible. So I think for me, it's a nice chemistry of both. Once in a while, I'll go to markets just to make that personal connection, and then online is fine also afterwards. But COVID definitely created the whole online world and made people more comfortable with working online, which, is good or bad, depending. Listen, at school here, half the students don't even come to the class. They either come online on Zoom or watch recorded lectures. Am I disappointed by that? Do I like students in front of me? Yeah, sure. But are they learning just as much? They're learning the same amount. So it's not so terrible.
And how did you actually talk to Netflix? How did you get to that point?
So back then, the first time I did it, they were actually open. Like they were taking meetings with they were a smaller company in 2015 than they are now. So they were actually, you could actually get a meeting with a Netflix buyer back then. You'd have to be very persistent, but you could email them or or call their head office and say, I'm an indie filmmaker, I got this film, blah, blah, blah. Can I meet with somebody? It would take a few weeks or a month or something, and then they would give you an appointment, you go and you pitch them. That doesn't happen anymore. Those days are over.
Was that like when they kind of, I don't know what year was that they kind of developed like Netflix original and started creating their own
So
movies?
what happened was originally they were all of their programming was supplied by primarily the big studios. That's Netflix drafted off of big programming, right? Then the studios all of a sudden noticed that Netflix was getting all the audience, and and they needed to get in that game. So even though COVID pushed it a little quicker, they were getting in that game anyway. So every studio was going to have their own streaming platform, which meant that Netflix wasn't going to have a supply from them, the majors. So they needed to get in the game of creating their own programming. That's when Netflix originals really, became a thing.
From your experience, what are the big differences between all the big studios and how they operate, and potentially getting your movies distributed by them?
Okay, can I rephrase your question
Yeah.
for you? What's the big difference between how a studio operates and how an independent filmmaker operates? Because me being an independent filmmaker,
Yeah.
so I operate kind of like a studio. So here's the big difference. Every big studio is profit motivated. Okay, they're public companies and they have shareholders and they need to make money in order to exist. That's their mandate. Now, they want to make good films because good films make money. But if they make a bad film and it makes money, they're very happy. Independent filmmakers generally take a little bit more pride in their work and not necessarily make better films, but they care more artistically about their work. All right, there's artistic integrity in making something that you're proud of, and a little less focus on making money. So, a big studio, you can't exist as a studio executive in a big studio if you're not focused on making money, because that's their mandate. Whereas in the independent world, if you're an artist and you're getting by or whatever, then you are celebrated because it's about art in the independent world. Now, me, as my wife says, I'm not truly an independent filmmaker, even though I make independent films. I made 7 of them, so I am an indie filmmaker in that respect, but I'm very profit motivated. So I think like the big studios, I think distribution, marketing, audience, how to monetize, I think that way. So artistically, do I want to make great films? Yes. But financially, if I don't make money, then I'm not happy.
That makes sense. I guess one of my important takeaways from today was how important the business side of filmmaking is. My whole life I kind of thought of filmmaking and just the film industry as something that would be a lot more artistic for me, and I wouldn't really, it wouldn't involve as much business. But clearly I was wrong, and that is very important. That's something I think we should all be thinking about as filmmakers and whatever we want to do, because that's how we're going to make money and survive, as well as making the art that we like to. So thank you for delivering all this information.
Okay, can I just respond to that before Alex said? First and foremost, you need to be a passionate filmmaker, and you need to focus most of your attention on the art of filmmaking. That's who you are, and that's who you want to be. So let me clarify. You should understand the rest of it, but you don't need to necessarily do it. Hopefully you will be good enough at your craft, and that will be enough. And just understanding the entire sort of scope of the industry is good enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I really want to be a director. I think it's important to understand it, but I also do love social media marketing and kind of want to go down that path. And, learning about this is very helpful because it kind of helps me decide what I want to do with my life. So I do really appreciate your time here today, and thank you for answering our questions.
Yeah, my pleasure. By the way, if you're good at social media marketing that is almost as artistic as making a good film. It may be more challenging. A little harder than film, you're contained, you know it, you got your script and everything like that. Social media marketing is just out there. How do you contain this? So you could be very successful in that area as well if you focus on that too. Okay, my kind of last words are, I love being asked questions. The tougher the better, because it's important to know the truth. It's important to know the whole landscape truthfully. because at least when you know what you're walking into, you have a chance of navigating it. All right, so it's better to know it up front, and that's why I'm willing to and welcome very, very tough questions. And of course, it's just my perspective. I think I have a good perspective because I've been in the industry for a long time. I've done distribution and marketing, so I know, and obviously production, so I know a lot of the elements and I know what to expect. Plus, I stay very up to speed on where the industry's at. I always say the streaming platforms we look at today might not be the ones we look at tomorrow because they change all the time. Social media, what a new adventure for me. Like influencers, that's a new adventure. I'm sure will continue to change. But what I'm encouraging all filmmakers to do is just always kind of look at the truth. Just accept the reality of what the business you're in, and then just deal with it. Because if you know it, it's easier to deal with, as opposed to just kind of burying your head in the sand and being blind about it. At least know what you're getting into, and you'll have a much better chance of success.
All right, thanks for watching Filmmakers Ask.